Good evening. Good evening. Here. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Stewart's Opera House's hosting of Spoken and Heard. My name is Devin Sudman. I am the Education Director here at Stewart's. I have black curly hair, light brown skin, and dark brown eyes, and I'm wearing my orange Stewart's Opera House t-shirt and a dark denim jacket. Stewart's Opera House is committed to our mission to be a regional leader in the arts community, a center for public expression, and an economic development partner for Southeast Ohio. We acknowledge that our historic theater sits on the traditional homelands of the Shawnee, Adena, and Hopewell peoples. We recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from this painful history of colonization, and we commit ourselves to respecting and reconciling this long history of injustice. Stewart's is committed to being more intentional in the role we can play for racial justice. We also commit to being more inclusive of people historically and currently marginalized based on identity, including gender, sexuality, class, and heritage. We wish to publicly express that hate and systemic oppression have no home in our organization. Now, I'll be dropping a donation link here in the chat for Stewart's, and you can also visit our website to find more about upcoming events and educational opportunities. This evening, I will be monitoring the chat as well as keeping an eye on the YouTube stream. And now, for what's most important, I want to introduce Carrie Gunter Seymour, your host for the evening. Carrie Gunter Seymour is the Poet Laureate of Ohio and a recipient of the 2021 Academy of American Poet Laureates Fellowship. Her poetry collections include A Place So Deep Inside America, It Can't Be Seen, which won the 2020 Ohio Poet of the Year Award, and the chapbook, Serving. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals and publications, including Rattle, One, the LA Times, the New York Times. Her work has been featured on Verse Daily, Cultural Daily, World Literature Today, and Poem a Day. A ninth generation Appalachian, my favorite part. She's the editor of I Thought I Heard a Cardinal Sing, Ohio's Appalachian Voices, and the Women of Appalachia Project's anthology series, Women Speak. She is an artist in residence for the Wexner Center for the Arts and a 2021-2022 Pillar of Prosperity Fellow for the Foundation for Appalachian Ohio. Visit her website at carriegunterseymourpoet.com, which I will also share in the chat. Now, please join me in welcoming Carrie Gunter Seymour.
Hi there, Kevin. Devin, I had a little problem with my video there for a minute. Here I am.
That was fine. You got here.
I got here. Hi there. And thank you so much, Devin, and all you fine folks at Stewart's Opera House. And I want to thank all of you out there for joining us this evening and all who will stream our program from Stewart's YouTube page and my personal Facebook page and Twitter posts, which I make available just after tonight's event. A special thanks to our ASL interpreters, Joe and Nico. They work their fine magic as they use their hands and expressions to share our words. And thank you to Stewart's for setting up transcription as well. So those of you who want to turn on transcription, you may do so. Now, I'm a pale-skinned woman with long, straight, I like to say blondish gray hair, but really I need to just admit I have gray hair. I wear glasses. The rims are tinted a dark color of green. I'm wearing a salmon colored t-shirt with lacy short sleeves and a purple headband. And believe me, somehow all these colors seem to be in harmony. My backdrop is botanical in shades of white and green and a bit of pink accent. And this is our last event for the spring season, and I'm very excited. This is pure Appalachian night, and I've invited 3 outstanding poets and writers who will share their work with us. Straight out of Kentucky, Marianne Worthington, West Virginia's own Doug Van Gundy, and Nima Avasya, who is West Virginia born and raised, but nowadays comes to us by way of Boston. You'll be able to find links to our guests' books and websites on the Stewart's Opera House homepage if you click on the Arts Education link, then scroll down. But I'll also be placing links in the chat for those of you who wish to purchase tonight. Just a heads up, we'll have a short Q&A after the reading, so if you in the audience want to ask a question, feel free to type it into the Q&A, and I'll be looking at that later to get your questions. Now, I wanted to just take a moment. Those of you who attend Spoken and Heard regularly have heard me speak of the Harshman Settlement School in Kentucky. Specifically, the week-long writers' workshop that I and so many friends, colleagues, and acquaintances have attended. Each of our featured guests tonight are Harshman alumni. Harshman and all of Appalachia suffered a great loss this week. Ron Houchin was a friend to many, and the kind of writer, poet, and person that everyone looked up to. He wrote 10 volumes of poetry, a short story collection, and a young adult novel. He won the Appalachian Book of the Year Award in 2005 and the Weatherford Award for Poetry in 2011. A volume of his selected poems, The Quiet Jars, was released in 2013 from Salmon Poetry in Ireland. He was an instructor at writing workshops in Prague and Dublin and down in Key West and at Hindman and so many other locations. He gave public readings of his work at scores of venues on both sides of the Atlantic, including here in Athens County at Spoken and Heard in May of 2019. He was a treasure, generous with his time, kind, and greatly beloved. There simply will never be another like him. I was going to read a poem of Ron's for you tonight, but I just don't feel qualified. And so I would like to invite you all after the event to go in search of him on the internet, and you will not be disappointed. His work is stunning, and you'll feel finer for it. So rest in power, Ron Houchin. You will be so greatly missed. And now, Nima Avasya is the author of Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. She was born and raised in southern West Virginia to parents who immigrated to the United States. She has been a middle school teacher in the Boston Public Schools since 2003. Her essays have appeared in the Bitter Southerner, Catapult, Kenyon Review Online, and many other places. I first had the pleasure of meeting Nima when she submitted her work for publication in my Women Speak anthology that I publish every year with my Women of Appalachia project. I have watched with the greatest delight as Nima has risen to rock star fame over the past few years. She's an amazing writer, educator, and human being, and I am so very excited for all of you to hear her read her work. Please welcome Nima Avasya. Nima.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. It's so good to be here with you. I have brown skin and brown eyes and glasses and hair that's maybe magenta right now, burgundy. Not sure the color. I dye my hair lots of different colors. And I'm wearing a maroon flannel shirt tonight. And tonight I'm going to read to you one essay from my book. This essay is called A Hindu Hillbilly Elegy. And it is numbered, so I'll kind of pause between the numbered sections. Just cranberry hair, Marianne. That's a good description of it. So I'll read the sections, but I'll read them with the numbers in between to kind of pause us. And each piece is kind of like it's like a collage. Okay. A Hindu Hillbilly Elegy. 1. When I hear the first strains of Om Jai Jagadish Hare, I'm instantly 5 years old again and racing around the exterior of the South Charleston Junior Women's Club with my friends. We throw salted peanuts into cups of Coke and scream with joy at the ensuing eruptions of brown foam, only stopping when ordered into the building by our parents for the final stage of the puja, the arti, the moment when light is offered to the deities. Out of breath and sticky-handed, we push our way to the front of the room where photos and idols cluster on a small table weighed down by offerings of fruit and sweets. Aunties in silken saris hold a flat silver thali decorated with designs made in rice and vermilion powder, upon which small cotton balls dipped in ghee have been lit. One by one, we approach them and take hold of one side of the thali, keeping our eyes on the flames and the idols as we move the thali through the air. First left, then right, then counterclockwise. As each of us finishes, we pass one hand over the flame, then over our heads, a motion ingrained in our muscle memory. Around us, elders clap their hands and sing the arti full-throated. We are a motley crew, this band of Hindus, gathering once a month to pray in southern West Virginia in the mid-1980s. Our families immigrated to the United States from all over India, sometimes by way of Kenya, Tanzania, or Uganda. Work as engineers or physicians has brought us to this tiny state whose W our parents confuse with V because we don't have a W sound in our home languages. In their mouths, West Virginia often becomes Vest Virginia. We live in a valley nestled by a river whose name we also struggle to pronounce. Kanawha, another W to deal with, in topography wholly unfamiliar to us. The leaves changing color each fall and then drifting to the ground in crunchy piles is a phenomenon that will perpetually fill us with amazement. Our immigration to almost heaven, West Virginia, began in the late 1960s. By 1990, Asians made up 0.4% of the state's 1.7 million person population. Cut that number in half, eliminating the Filipino, Chinese, and Korean communities, and you have the number of South Asians in the state. Cut that number down to Indians of the Hindu faith, and you have less than 2,000 people statewide. A single Christian megachurch in my hometown had as many members in its congregation as our entire faith did in the whole state. Hinduism, in its non-polemicized form, is a loose amalgam of texts, mythologies, philosophies, and rituals. It isn't held together by a pope or a network of clergy. Our priests act as conductors of ritual, not spiritual advisors. In truth, our religion is largely self-directed and individualized, which is fine when you live in a country where many of the other 1 billion inhabitants also practice their faith that way, where there's a temple on every corner, and your religion's holy days are state-sanctioned holidays. Adherence to the faith proved more difficult for me, often the only Hindu in a crowd of Christian classmates. I know this is not just a Nima problem. Nearly every week, I see an article proclaiming the erosion of faith in America. But that erosion, in my case, was both enacted upon me and by me. 2, I heard that people like you worship cows. I was in elementary school the first time somebody hurled that phrase at me, much the same way a bloody cow's head had been hurled at the door of our makeshift temple in the basement of a house once in the late 70s. How does a child explain faith to another child? We don't worship cows. We just think they're sacred. Worship, sacred. To a Christian kid in West Virginia with limited vocabulary, what was the difference? My polytheistic faith was incomprehensible. The blue gods, the ones with elephant heads, the ones whose stories my mother recounted and I hungrily devoured, were mocked by my classmates in the world outside our home. Why don't you eat meat? They would ask, eyeing my fluorescent yellow lemon rice, stained by turmeric and packed in a biohazard Ziploc bag my thrifty father had taken from the chemical plant. The orange skull and crossbones on the front did nothing to ease my outsider status. Hindus don't believe in violence. Killing animals is a form of violence, so we don't eat meat. I gave them the same answers my parents had given me when I asked them at our dinner table, but the answers I accepted unquestioningly didn't suffice. What if plants have feelings? What if that carrot is actually screaming when you cut into it? Aren't you committing violence then? Again, I failed to know how to explain. So much of culture and faith had been automated for me, much as they had been for my Christian peers, that I couldn't provide reasoned responses to their questions. It never occurred to me to turn the microscope on them, on their faith, on their culture. Such is the curse of being the minority during childhood, I suppose, and never quite feel safe to challenge dominance in that way. Instead, their shaming questions prick tiny holes in my nascent faith, tapping any reserves built up at home and at puja. 3, my bedtime routine as a child was the same every night. My mom came into my room and patted my back as she sang Gujarati and Sanskrit bhajans to me. I fell asleep each night to the sounds of Raghupati Raghav and Vakratunda Mahakaya, learning the words long before I learned the meanings. When I sought to understand, instead of just parrot, and deliberately asked my mom to translate word for word, pushing her knowledge of Sanskrit vocabulary beyond its limits, I sometimes found that the songs didn't resonate for me. Singing about Ganpati's curved trunk, round body, and brilliance of 100 suns didn't fill me with a sense of spirituality. It was my mom's voice that convinced me all was right in the world, not the words she was singing. I remember wanting desperately to emulate her piety, but failing to understand the source of her devotion. I sang the songs, replicated the rituals, hoping to capture the same holiness I saw on her face when she stood at the altar in our kitchen. Still, no matter how hard I stared at my reflection in the tiny silver idols, I never saw the same look mirrored on my face. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that I don't sing those bhajans to myself at night when I have trouble sleeping, or that I don't say a quick Bhagwan Badanu Balu Karjo, Bhagwan Badanu Rakshan Karjo every time I board a plane, asking God to forgive me for my mistakes and keep me safe. Or that I didn't listen to Raghupati Raghav, Gandhi's favorite hymn, on repeat 6 years ago when my cousin committed suicide at the age of 30, and I inexplicably set up the idols on my altar in front of his picture, lit incense, and sang along. 4. A sampling of conversion attempts by Christians in chronological order. 1986. A neighbor invites me to attend Sunday school with her. I pressure my mom into letting me go, and after a few sessions, find myself up at the altar being saved. My mom never lets me go back to Sunday school again. 1992. My middle school basketball coach forces our team to say the Lord's Prayer before every game. Participation is not optional. I can still recite it verbatim today. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. 1994. A Mormon high school classmate sends blonde-haired, black-suited missionaries to my house. My parents keep the Book of Mormon that is proffered, unsure of how to turn it down. They send the missionaries on their way. 1996. A friend invites me to a Super Bowl party at her church. All goes well until halftime, when the pastor turns off the television and asks for people to bow their heads, then encourages people in the room who are ready to accept Jesus into their hearts to raise their hands. I am the only person in the room who's not already a member of the church. I squeeze my eyes shut tight, keep my head bowed, and count the minutes until halftime is over and the game begins again. And then there is the constant question asked every time our brown-skinned family attends a gathering of white West Virginians. Have you been saved? Have you been saved? Have you been saved? The litany is exhausting. The holes in the fabric of my faith grow larger. I don't seek to patch them up with Christianity. I simply wish I did not have to explain or justify my inherited out-of-place identity. 5. My favorite family photo depicts 3 Indian couples on an autumn road trip. The men, complete with shocks of thick black hair and patterned bell-bottom pants. The women, with luxurious braids and chanlos painted on their foreheads, stand in front of a log grist mill. The red and orange leaves of West Virginia scattered around. Their children, ranging in age from infancy to 10 years old, squirm on laps and scramble towards the edges of the frame. Each fall, my parents organized a trip to a state park in West Virginia for us and the other West Virginia Gujaratis who became our inherited family. At Pipestem or Hawk's Nest or Blackwater Falls, we hiked through deciduous forest, waded in creek beds, rode horses, and sang Bollywood songs and Hindu bhajans by the light of the campfire. We ate khichdi for dinner and Taze Valley biscuits for breakfast. Through these trips, I grew to love the wild and wonderful aspects of West Virginia, even as I struggled with the religious and racial elements. Its natural beauty settled into my sensory memory right next to the Hindu puja. West Virginia is the only home I know, though it is not a home that always loves me back. The same holds true for many of my peers from the Hindu hillbilly crew, the rowdy children who played until it was time to go in for puja. While the tug of war between the culture of their homeland and the culture of their new home certainly existed for my parents and their friends, the impact on their identities seemed far less extensive than it was for the Indian American young people of my generation. By the time our parents moved to America, their identity formation was largely complete. Their work, in some senses, was about recreating the sensory experiences and rituals of their past. But they always had their past as a point of reference. For young people in our community, the challenge was different. As adolescents, deep in the throes of identity formation, holding to our parents' religious faith was much harder. We didn't have the same emotional attachment to the rituals, the sensory memory of what the holidays actually felt like, or what it felt like to share those holidays with family. We had modified rituals, simulations of holidays, held in incongruous spaces with fluorescent lighting and shiny linoleum flooring. My mom waxes nostalgic about doing Navratri Garba for all 9 nights growing up in India. I only know the experience of 2 weekend Garbas held in the same middle school gymnasium where I took phys ed from Monday through Friday. If anything, the closest approximation to faith for me might be the omnipresent pull to go home to the mountain state. The way the colors of a West Virginia fall still render me breathless. How the lyrics of Country Roads evoke an enormous lump in my throat. It's the hillbilly part of my upbringing that has stayed with me, even as so many of the Hindu elements slowly fall away. 6. One year, when my sister and I both inhabited the teen sector of the age spectrum, my parents decided it wasn't enough for us to just visit family on our sporadic trips to India. We needed to see the country more broadly. They took us on a trip to South India, a trip on which I often found my angsty teen self moaning, "Not another temple," or "not another palace." My aversion stemmed partially from being a teenager, and so opposed to any idea my parents had. But I also felt front. Menstruating women were not allowed to enter. Women whose clothing showed their shoulders or legs were not allowed to answer. Men wearing pants and not lungis, a kind of male sarong, were not allowed to enter. I wore gaudy jam shorts and a white t-shirt. My sister had on a sleeveless, shapeless dress. My father wore his usual pants and collared shirt. Vendors outside the temple hawked rented lungis and scarves, urging my father to take them. He barked at them angrily, muttering, "I'm not giving you money for that dirty fabric." Effectively, at each of these temples, the only person allowed to enter was my mom, dressed in a traditional sari. The rest of us had to wait outside. Waiting outside only served to further my discomfort. Hungry children in tattered clothing looked at us with pleading eyes, bringing their hands to their cracked lips in an eating gesture. Flies buzzed around the head of a man suffering from elephantiasis, a condition caused by parasitic worms that resulted in his leg swelling to massive proportions, like those of an elephant, rendering him immobile. The contrast between the smooth, indulgent marble and gold of the temple and the ashy, wrinkled texture of the skin stretching over the pauper's swollen leg was too much for me to handle. This wasn't the warm and communal Hinduism of the Junior Women's Club that I knew and loved. This was organized, institutionalized religion with all its classed and gendered hypocrisies. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure I wanted to be Hindu anymore. 7. I thought I knew the rituals of Hindu weddings well. The circles my sister and her future husband would take around the fire, the 7 steps they would take, making a vow with each step. I knew that our brothers would throw rice into the fire to symbolize their support of my sister as she entered married life. But typing up English translations of the various phases of the ceremony for my sister's wedding, I reached a stage that confounded. The point in the ceremony where married women were supposed to approach my sister and whisper this phrase, "Akhand Sobhagyavati," into her ear. "Mom, how would you translate Akhand Sobhagyavati?" I asked. My mom answered without hesitation. "It means, may you die before your husband." I'm sorry, what? It comes from the time when women were still forced to commit sati if their husbands died before they did. So women would wish each other an early death in order to avoid the prospect of being burned on the funeral pyre. Her tone was calm and matter of fact. Meanwhile, my 22-year-old brain filled with righteous feminist rage. My sister, in the final months of her final year of residency, did not have time to engage in this level of detail when it came to her wedding. It was up to me to delete the description from the program. "We're not doing that," I proclaimed, pounding delete on the keyboard for emphasis. My mom was adamant that the ritual of women blessing the bride remained part of the ceremony. So we found a compromise. In accordance with my mom's wishes, on my sister's wedding day, 9 women from our community approached my sister and whispered in her ear. In accordance with mine, instead of saying the Akhand Sobhagavati of previous generations, they whispered their own personal wishes for a happy and successful marriage. I watched proudly from the first row, feeling, for once, like I had managed to merge the traditions of my heritage with the ethos of my American upbringing. Eight. In my adult life, ritual has fully supplanted faith when it comes to the question of religion. My partner, Laura, is the product of a Catholic father and a Jewish mother. In October, we go to Navratri Garbas held in middle schools in the northern suburbs of Boston. In November, we celebrate Diwali by cooking a big dinner and setting off illegal fireworks. We have a menorah and a Christmas tree in our living room in December, and the tree is decorated with a hodgepodge of ornaments that only could happen in our home: a menorah and Om, Brooklyn and West Virginia, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Frederick Douglass, pickles, pizza, and rainbows. A tiny altar sits in our pantry, upon which reside Hindu idols, along with a glass Jesus that a student gave me as a gift. Guilt prevents me from discarding it. Sometimes Laura comes home to the pervasive smell of incense. Sometimes I fry up a batch of latkes to celebrate Hanukkah. But rarely, usually only in the case of a marriage, a funeral, or a high holiday, do either of us cross the threshold of temples, synagogues, or churches. And when it came to our own marriage, the decision to have a very secular, very simple wedding was easy for us to make, but difficult for my family to handle. The night before the ceremony, my sister said to me, "It's really hard for me that there will not be any vidi at your wedding." But neither Laura nor I could imagine a ceremony where we turned to deeply religious, deeply gendered rituals to commemorate our queer secular relationship. Still, some elements of my childhood faith are hard to let go of. Last summer, Laura and I made one of our favorite drives through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, a dimly lit cavern of concrete and tile that spits drivers out onto a bridge with a stunning view of the minuscule but well-placed Pittsburgh skyline. Laura loves the drive because it reminds her of the perks of being a wallflower and the feeling of being infinite. I love the drive because it reminds me of childhood trips to Pittsburgh for Indian groceries, a visit to the Hindu temple, and a momentary reminder that there are indeed places in America where Indians make up more than 0.2% of the population. You know where Hindus on the East Coast ask for their ashes to be scattered? I asked. Pittsburgh, I'm guessing? Yeah, but do you know why? She didn't. Why would she? Pittsburgh is the Triveni Sangam of the East Coast, the place where 3 rivers meet. In India, the most holy place for ashes to be scattered is at the confluence of the Jamuna, the Ganga, and the Saraswati rivers. Pittsburgh is the American equivalent, the site where the Monongahela and the Allegheny converge to form the Ohio. My mom wishes for her ashes to be scattered in Sedona, Arizona, but I know that after the West Virginia University School of Medicine is done with my father's donation of his body to science, his ashes will be scattered at this confluence. So too will those of my American citizen aunts and uncles. This Triveni Sangam is my family's burial ground. The Judeo-Christian concept of burial is something I can't get my head around, a slow, suffocating decomposition at the hands of soil and worms. I briefly considered the Zoroastrian method, having my body placed on top of a mountain for birds to take heavenwards in their beaks, but this seems both bloody and impractical. In the end, this Hindu ritual is what I want: cremation, ashes, the throwing of a blessed coconut into the water, the utterance of hymns I've been singing since childhood, a way to return to the mix of Hinduism and Appalachian heritage that have defined me from the beginning. Scatter my ashes in Pittsburgh, I told Laura. From Pittsburgh, those ashes will float downstream. South to Wheeling, Moundsville, Parkersburg, Ravenswood, and eventually to Point Pleasant, where they will mingle with the waters of the Kanawha, slowly carrying me homewards. Thank you.
You've left me breathless, Nima. How absolutely wonderful of you to give this incredibly intimate look into your modified Hindu hillbillyism. I mean, it's just fantastic. Just, yes, in the chat, people are saying, gorgeous, gorgeous, amazing. It really is. Those wonderful details that I know we would pick up more of were we reading the book in front of us, but hearing you read it was so wonderful. But I'm picturing this little girl with a biohazard baggie in her lunchbox with crossbones on it, and how some of the kids were probably appalled and some of them were fascinated and thought you were the coolest. So there were so many beautiful things. I love the part where you tried going to Sunday school and they tried to save you and your mama said, no way, you know. And I just really loved your standing up for your sister concerning the wedding ritual, the blessings to the bride, and what a lovely compromise. And so I just thank you so much for sharing all of that with us and helping to educate us, you know, in this way that many of us don't get this opportunity. So thank you for tonight, and thank you for this amazing book that I know is just doing so well. So congratulations to you, Nima. I'm so happy for you. Okay, well, my goodness, and we have more, but wait, there's more, goodness. Doug Van Gundy directs the low residency MFA writing program at West Virginia Wesleyan College. His poems, essays, and reviews have appeared in many national and international publications, including Poetry, The Guardian, The Oxford American. He is co-editor of the anthology Eyes Glowing at the Edge of the Woods, Contemporary Writing from West Virginia, and the author of a collection of poems, A Life Above Water, published by Red Hen Press. He is the poetry editor at Change 7 Literary Journal and the advisor for Heartwood Magazine, which is in association with the low residency MFA program at West Virginia Wesleyan College. Both of these are such fine online journals. Doug is one of the many wonderful folks I met at the Heinemann Writers Workshop, and we've kept in touch via social media, and he has through the years found some of my work worthy of publication. Doug is an amazing poet and an incredible musician as well, and I'm so very excited to have him with us tonight. So please welcome Doug Van Gundy, friends.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Great to see you, and thanks very much to our to Nico and Joe for doing the ASL interpretation. It is an honor to be here and a real pleasure. I am a middle-aged, pale-skinned, ruddy-skinned man with a white beard and gray hair. I'm wearing a blue shirt with very small botanical print in white. The background behind me is an open window. You may be able to see some goldfinches flitting around feeders and a little bit of foliage behind me. I'm going to read a number of poems for you this evening. Thanks to Nima for that wonderful, wonderful reading. I was lucky enough to have friends from the South Asian diaspora growing up in Elkins, West Virginia, and I spent a lot of time having Indian home cooking at my friends' homes and growing up eating those foods and watching those Bollywood movies also. And it was wonderful to get a deeper appreciation of your day-to-day experience that I, of course, could not know, but also to be reminded of the ways that Hindu and Indian cultures percolated into my life growing up as a non-Hindu hillbilly. So thanks very much, Nima. I'm going to start with a poem called Keeper. I am too small to concern him. He is seeking sleeker, keeper-sized fish, spotted brown trout and iridescent rainbows. From beneath the water, I cannot see the line to which the fly is tied, only his liquid arms, the slow motion of back casting and roll casting, the pause and presentation. I have been watching him for hours and have seen the larger fish pulled into the sky, kissed and then released. I have raced to their sides to ask them what it's like. It's like dying, one says, and then it's beautiful. If only I could breathe up there. You can't imagine the taste of air on your skin and the sweet, heavy sensation of feeling your own weight. He drifts to a dark place beneath a sandstone ledge to dream of a life above water. I long to live in my father's sky, in his world of clouds and boots and hands. In that moment, I will be large enough to keep, large enough that he will tuck me into his creel, carry me home, and teach me the language that lives inside new lungs. This next poem is called A People's History of Randolph County, West Virginia. And it's what I would call a ladder poem. The first 11 lines occur, and then they occur in the exact opposite order, but the meaning shifts and changes. I hope you'll be able to hear what's happening there. A People's History of Randolph County, West Virginia. Imagine how it used to be. All that remains now are stones and ghosts. You can't look at the old topographical maps and see the places where the miners used to live. Even the names of the settlements are missing. Jeff Scott's, Laurel, Roaring Creek Junction. If you go there today, bushwhack through briars and Joe Pie, you will have to dig into the ground to find anything to prove that people ever even lived here. To prove that people ever even lived here, dig into the ground. To find anything, you will have to bushwhack through briars and Joe Pie if you go there today. Jeff Scott's, Laurel, Roaring Creek Junction, even the names of the settlements are missing, the places where the miners used to live. Look at the old topographical maps and see. All that remains now are stones and ghosts. You can't imagine how it used to be.
I just wanted to let you know that I think your microphone, it's down and you're scraping your papers across it, and we can hear that. So
All right.
thank you.
And I would like to let you know that I cannot see the ASL interpreter. I'm just seeing your screen with the camera turned off. So
Oh, goodness.
I'm trying to pace myself in such a way that they're able to keep up, but I hope I'm doing an okay job with
I
that.
think you are. And maybe this time when I turn my camera off, she'll pop up. I hope.
I hope. Thank you.
Doing great, Doug. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Oh, Wonderful. This poem, and thank you for the interpretation. This poem is called Burgoo. And Burgoo is a small town that was a mining camp. There's an epigraph, a little introductory quote from the radio station that I listened to as a child. And every morning and every evening, they would read the mine report, telling which mines were going to work and which ones were not. So the epigraph is, Burgoo mine number 1 will not work. Burgoo mine number 1 will not work tomorrow. These mountains have stopped swallowing men and spitting them back out, bruised by what they've seen and done. The men are gone, minds emptied, drift mouths mute. Coal camp names remain: Burgoo, Parkole, Diana, stripped, half-sung litany of used to be. That poem and the next 2 poems come from a series that I did for the Guardian newspaper out of Britain. I did with a photographer named Matt Eich, E-I-C-H, and which is now, it was published in the Guardian and is now available as a chapbook. So that poem and these next 2 come from that series. This poem is called Hymn for Coal Smoke. Praise the antique odor, wood smoke compressed and marinated in subsea strata and mountain hillsides to a richer, sharper smell. Incense burned on an ancient animal altar. Praise the thready column in chilly air, slow to dissipate, almost an entity in and of itself, black stone, burnt to yellow smoke and snow white ash. Praise the scent, the sweat inside the scent, sweetness of the human animal, salt of its labor, blood smell in the mineral dark. And staying in, my poems tend to have, I guess, a slightly darker edge sometimes. This is a poem called Home Burial, a love poem. Please, don't allow any strangers to lie on this ridge, or any backhoes to dig into this ground. I need you to make a shovel-opened, shoulder-pride grave for me when I go. Box me, don't burn me. Store me away in a hillside I know like my bones. Dig down to a clay floor so water won't get in too easy. While I want to die quickly, I want my body to linger as long as it can, at least a quarter century between box and bare bones. There is no way you can bury me without entering the earth yourself. You need to know that worm's eye view. Feel the blade of the spade slicing through roots of unknowable plants. See the rectangle of trapped sky from the bottom of my grave. Make certain it's safe enough, deep enough, square enough to hold my eternity. Once I'm packaged and lowered, and the preacher has intoned his boilerplate, and you have heaped your plate with fried chicken and pie, shovel me covered. After you do this, there is nothing I will not do for you. I believe in the body, not its resurrection. I didn't intend for that to be in dialogue with Nima's reading, but it kind of is. And I like that very much. In point of fact, I want to be cremated, and I love Pittsburgh, so Nima, perhaps you and I can be scattered in the same river. This next poem is a poem that first appeared in Still, the journal, for which Marianne Worthington, our next reader, is the poetry editor. And I'm grateful to Marianne for all of her support and friendship over the years. This is called Last Thoughts on Electronic Voice Projection. I should maybe say that electronic voice projection is the idea the voices of the dead can be heard in the hiss of recording tape or the sounds that are collected by radio telescopes. And it's also about my grandmother. Here's the poem. My grandmother calls less and less frequently since she died. And when she does, it's always to complain. She is cold. She is hungry. The coroner has made a mistake. That sort of thing. I listen as patiently as I can. I am still in love with the music of her voice. While she was alive, she'd sing big band standards in her nasal soprano, the whole time stuffing pork chops or washing the dishes, until I'd slip an arm around her back and waltz her around the linoleum, me taking over the singing, she giggling like a little girl and dripping soap from the waterlogged rag in her hand. Now, her voice is ossifying through the degrees, getting thinner and thinner, now FM, now AM. Finally, she will open her mouth on the wordless static of the stationless radio or interstellar space. One day, I'll answer the phone and hear even less than the background sound of the line. Only the silence behind the silence. My memory of her having gone as voiceless as a doll. This poem has, as a warning, has a mild profanity. This is a prose poem called To Join the Circus. And it's about my great-grandfather. He was 15 years old when he ran off as people do in stories, to join the circus. His mother wept for 2 whole days, starved for news, until a postcard came, telling her which train would deliver his dirty laundry for her to wash. She caught the bag at the siding in 100 West Virginia on Saturday afternoon and handed back clean clothes to her grinning son when the circus train slowed for the crossing Monday morning. He'd joined the Leaf Brothers Circus out of Fairmont, the local ticket to a life under canvas and home for church every 3rd Sunday. He started out sweeping the show ponies' stalls, laying out hay after the evening performances, and picking up shit in the morning. He graduated to the show's only elephant, then, little by little, learned tumbling, balance tricks, and finally, the contortionist's art, passing his slender frame through an unstrung tennis racket, or balancing a glass of water on his forehead, lowering himself prone and getting back to his feet, all without spilling a drop. This was before the war, the first one, the big one, the fields of Flanders and the weeks standing ankle deep in piss and muddy water. The circus had prepared him for that, at least. That and the endless hours of waiting, the sleeping anywhere in any conditions, dreaming of his own bed and home at the end of the tour. I'm going to, the next poem is called Revival, but just a warning, I'm going to skip a couple of poems. I'll let you know which ones. Thanks. This is called Revival. Dust hangs over the river bottom like background music. A low murmur of light. Just off the hard road, high school kids are making $3 an hour, pointing at places for cars to park. Last week, this pasture was full of polled Herefords, and next week it will be again. But for now, Jeeps and Hondas and F-150 pickups jostle cheek by jowl like cattle shooted for the slaughterhouse. Their drivers drawn out of faith or fear or animal curiosity toward the canvas tent that, glowing in the gathering dark, throbs softly with music and shouting and sudden amens. This next poem is called Restoration. Put it back with your imagination, the only way you can. Backfill all of the road cuts. Lay down strata 1,000,000 years at a time. Reforest the hillsides with 1/3 as many trees, 4 times as big around, and half again as tall. Peel up all of the pavement. Dredge topsoil from river delta, sea bottom, floodplain, and lay it back on its home hillside, carried in your arms like an infant from the car seat, careful not to set its eyelids fluttering. Tear down the dams, grind their concrete back into sand and quicklime, and store it all appropriately somewhere inside the earth. Trap every sparrow, starling, and house wren, and ship them back to Europe to refeather their skies. There is nothing to be done about the Carolina parakeet, the passenger pigeon, the woodland buffalo, all those millions of disappeared animals left as scattered bones, some things being impossible, even in dreams. I'm going to skip the next two poems I had prepared, so you'll know. And the next poem is called The Return of the Almighty. Good. If the return engagement is to follow the modus operandi of his previous run, then he will be born in a humble place, a place where the common and the poor will find him, where the riches of kings and wise men from the East will seem out of place. And if we are to be blessed by his return during the current age, then shouldn't the Lord be born in a Walmart in rural West Virginia? Quite probably the one down the road from my house. His frightened new mother will swaddle him in a gray Property of Jesus XXL fleece hoodie from the ample center aisle display, and lay him in a green plastic wheelbarrow from the garden department. And the shoppers and pilgrims will be drawn without understanding why, past the displays of 88-cent Hershey bars and pyramids of Axe deodorant body spray, to kneel among the bagged grass seed and potted pepper plants, beholding the newborn Lord. And I'm going to do one more. I'm going to finish with one more, which is called A West Virginia Prayer, staying with the religious material. And this one also includes mild profanity. A West Virginia Prayer. Thou of the tin can cut, Martha White self-rising communion wafer, who turned the milk to buttermilk, whose blood was turned to elderberry wine, whose countenance shines more golden than the stood-up yolk of a laid this morning egg, lifted from the feathered nest of a Wyandotte hen. We beseech thee, hear our prayer. Save us, O Lord, from this other God, the one of the heavy weather and flood waters floating our furniture away, the one whose angels are indistinguishable from our meth-martyred children, the one who blesses the well-intentioned oil and gas companies who have found a way to further destroy your creation, our home. Leave us, we pray, our pole beans and trout streams. Leave us a desire to remember recipes, old music, and stories. Restore in us the ability to tell a son of a bitch politician who wants to help us from one who doesn't give a good goddamn about us. Leave us, we pray, enough self-respect to say no now and then, or just leave us. Thank you.
I knew this was going to be difficult tonight to be able to respond after the readings because it's just so wonderful. Doug, you have such wisdom, and I've always thought that about you, even when I first met you. Oh my gosh, keeper-sized fish, his liquid arms, fish pulled into the sky, so graphic and so vivid and so visual. Your latter poem was exquisite. And yes, it was very, very, I could very easily feel that turn and see what you're doing there. And it was just wonderful that it was written so beautifully that we could experience it without seeing it on the page. When you talked about burying and when you were to be buried, and I love that phrase, I believe in the body, I believe in the body. Oh my goodness. And of course, your grandmother singing soprano and you waltzing her around the room on top of the linoleum, and she's stuffing pork chops in her mouth. What an amazing, amazing poem, and an amazing, amazing grandmother. And thank you for sharing her with us. And then bringing us all the way back around to church. And, shouldn't the Lord these days, shouldn't the Lord be born in a Walmart? Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you, Doug, for that. Just extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Oh my goodness. And there is still more, and I'm so happy for it. Marianne Worthington is co-founder and editor of Still the Journal, an online literary magazine which publishes writers, artists, and musicians with ties to Appalachia since 2009. Her work has appeared in Oxford American, Calyx, Chapter 16, Ethel, and Cheap Pop, among many, many other places. She received the Al Smith Fellowship from the Kentucky Arts Council and artist grants from Kentucky Foundation for Women and the Berea Appalachian Sound Archives Fellowship. She co-edited Piano in a Sycamore, Writing Lessons from the Appalachian Writers Workshop, and is author of a poetry chapbook and a brand new poetry collection, The Girl Singer, which was released in late 2021 from Fireside Industries, which is an imprint of University Press of Kentucky, which just won the coveted Weatherford Award for Excellence in Southern Literature. Marianne grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, and lives, writes, and teaches in southeastern Kentucky. Well, Still the Journal was the very first journal to publish my work, which was Marianne's doing. And it helped me believe in myself and gave me courage to continue. And since then, Marianne and I've crossed paths many times, including at the Writers' Workshop in Heinemann. And Still a Journal is truly not just my opinion. This is the opinion of many, one of Appalachia's most outstanding publications. And if you have not yet come upon it, I hope you will seek it out. Marianne is hardworking and a word wizard, and you will hear all of this. So please welcome Marianne Worthington.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Carrie, for your introduction. And thanks to Devin and to Nico and to Joe for being here and hosting us tonight. By way of description, I'm an old white woman. I have white hair. I'm wearing glasses. And tonight I'm wearing a burgundy shirt with a black sweater and a gold chain that contains the wedding rings of my mother and father. And my background is blurred tonight. I wanted to start by reading a few poems from my collection, The Girl Singer. And I wanted to read some poems that I don't usually read from that collection. And then I'll end by reading a few new poems tonight. So the first poem I want to read is the very first poem that's in the collection. And I wrote this poem as I was coming home from West Virginia. I had been to see my friend Ron Houchin, who Carrie mentioned in the beginning, who died last week. And And I want to read this for Nima and for Doug, the native West Virginians in our company tonight. And you'll also hear the words from probably one of the most famous West Virginia poets, Louise McNeil. This is called Rank Stranger. Storm clouds and lashing rain follow me out of the jewel city alongside the words of the poet who claimed her granny Fanny lived such old ways. It was as if she had set her thorn broom handle into the world's axis and brought it to a grinding halt. Still, the Ohio River curls on as I hit the highway toward home. The road is a smoldering ribbon past the oil refineries in Ashland. The green and lavender hills smear in the opening ahead as the sun raises the angry curtain of clouds, revealing a colony of turkey buzzards by the roadside. Their feathers glisten dark jewels, their shoulders droop. I see the stiff legs of the dead thing they are encircling. They join the one atop the dead, the one glutting from the side, the others waiting their turn. And here are a couple of poems related to memories of my childhood growing up in Knoxville. The memories weren't always good. I grew up in a very segregated place, and these two poems speak to that. The first one is called Pentecost, 1965. First Creek churns under the Fifth Avenue Viaduct in the old part of town. Brick warehouses testify to a Sunday shifting toward a lazy haze. Summer is coming. The girl watches for the Axeman riding his bicycle down Central Avenue. He's duct taped plastic sheets to dowels, built a shelter so he can ride in all weathers. She likes to read his hand-scrawled signs fixed to his bike tent, verses from the Acts of the Apostles. At church, the preacher could call him a witness for Jesus, but the Axeman is Black and poor, ignored, even though we all see him every day. He pedals down Magnolia Avenue like it's the road to Damascus. The preacher cries about tongues of fire and a mighty rushing wind, but the green branches sway easy when the Axeman passes. After church, the girls' great feast will be killed lettuce and onions, side meat, and skillet cornbread set atop a formica table. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. James Brown performs Cold Sweat on American Bandstand, 1968. We were practicing our splits, perfecting our slides across the basement floor on one foot. Impossible to beat the hardest working man in show business, even as we cheated in our sock feet. Upstairs, our grandmother hurled her wrecking ball voice at us before we finished miming the first verse. We knew she wasn't really hollering about the TV blaring or that we'd skipped our Saturday housework chores. She wasn't really cross that we dragged her white chenille bedspread downstairs so we'd have a royal robe to throw off at the end of the song. We twisted against the timbre of her rage, while we mimicked soul brother number one, cloaked by Danny Ray, then coaxed off the stage, exhausted, only to revive, abandon the cape, and grab that microphone and whirl and gyrate and split us one more time. And here's a couple of poems about where I live now. I live in a very rural, small place in southeastern Kentucky. This is called Small Town Gossip. The best place to hear it, not in the beauty shop, that warren of backcombing and flaming hearsay, nor the church house where prayer requests stand in for scandal. Do not listen for it in the garages, where men gather by twos and threes, gripping their coffee cups and old grudges, or in the dollar store, where old couples block the aisles, comparing ailments, and dog-tired young women run in for cheap diapers while their men wait for them smoking in idling cars. You won't hear it in the grocery store either, as aggravated shoppers fume into their phones while stalking the aisles. The best place, just listen, the best place is before good daylight, when the mockingbird practices his scales, when the redbirds wake and cheer each other to the day's work, chipping seed and ignoring the propaganda of jaybirds and crows. And since we're coming up on garden season, this is a poem about a garden. It's called Bounty. In the dewy morning, the cucumbers you twisted from prickly garden vines will darken and crisp on your yellow kitchen table, preserving a memory of tendrils crawling through wormy soil and the broad leaves that canopied them in the heated day. They remember stretching from melon flowers. They remember the bees who sugared the stigma. Their seeds will tell you a story of sowing and reaping, a tale suspended in jelly, recited in your salads, and read in the Benedictine spread on your bread, tasted in an emerald grace. And here is a new poem. It's called The Dwindling. I've been thinking so much about animals that we have lost, as Doug mentioned in his poem. Although I was heartened the other day, I don't know if you all have seen the news that they think now that the Lord God bird, the ivory-billed woodpecker, is actually not extinct. There's been a sighting of it in Arkansas, so I was heartened by that. But I've been thinking about animals I don't see anymore and animal sounds I don't hear anymore. And that's where this poem begins. It's called The Dwindling. Before the field became a building, before I lost my sense of wonder, the lanky field grass whistled to me. My father heard the grasslands trilling and imitated the call I heard that summer. It's a bird, a quail that calls its own name. Bob White, Bob White, Bob White. The woods we learned by following boys who knew the shortcuts from backyards yawning open into awnings of shade and a coolness that splashed our faces. Leaf litter cackled under our feet. Under the trees, we sleuthed until we surfaced, surprised by how we arrived behind the rec center or at the store at the foot of the ridge. After dark, we heard another bird shrilling the double letters of its name, whippoorwill, whippoorwill, whippoorwill. My father might call back through the dark, singing out a remembrance in his high voice. She is mine, and the thought of her grows sweeter when it's time for the whippoorwill to sing. Sometimes I dream he sings yet. He knew so many songs. I want to dream the calls of the quail and the nightjar, for only in sleep can I hear their music, absent like my father's singing voice, spent as the field and the woods. And here's another piece about my father and some other folks. This is a prose poem, I guess, and I'm very happy that it's going to be published this summer. It's called Mimosa. The mimosa trees surge toward the roads by late May. All is green. Their fronds wave as women might wave a church fan on Sundays. They wear pink hats, little fluffs that will darken and bloom all summer and sing to butterflies and hummingbirds. A choir of mimosas swells and blurs along the interstate as I drive toward my father. His body is now rigid and uncooperative. His right side, his foot, leg, hand, arm, brain, was damaged from a stroke he suffered at age 16. And 7 decades later, his legs are planks, his arms are slack sticks, his memory pruned. His care is more than we can give, so my mother secures his place at a nursing home, the same nursing home we visited at Christmas as Sunday school girls, singing carols in the humid rooms of old people. From their beds, they stared blankly, their mouths sagging. A few reached their arms toward us, brittle and spotted, and we offered them our green felt Christmas tree cutouts decorated with red rickrack. This is the same place where decades before, my father had weekly visited his consumptive uncle when this place was a TB sanatorium. This place has been standing in North Knoxville for a century. This place is haunted. This place is where my grandmother died. This place, my father lives inside. Mimosa trees in East Tennessee are beloved and reviled. We remember their arms when children and how easy they were to climb. We spent afternoons making whole worlds in mimosa trees. But the mimosa stands stiff-necked and stubborn in the face of all elements. Their seed pods are abounding. They grow wild and unchecked, choking out the native species and displacing homegrown plants and wildlife. The rows of mimosas flourishing along the fence at the entrance to the nursing home bow in unison as I pull in to face this building again and all my family spirits who dwell here still. My father only makes it a month in here. We gather and stand with him as he dies one Sunday in late May. The 3 toes on his right foot turn blue, his legs purple. A sweet nurse we've never seen before appears and reminds us of the morphine order. After one injection, his breathing slows, stops. We are so sad, but calm. We are relieved. The mimosas glimmer in the floodlights along the grounds when I go outside to call his sister. The air is sweet, not like honeysuckle, but floral, like my grandmother's hand lotion she kept at the kitchen sink. In the dark, I hear the fern-like branches trembling the air. The mimosa trees, the most beautiful of aggressive weeds, will keep me company all summer. I will see them everywhere, and they will be coupled with my father and the night of his dying. They will wave their fronds, pink tops shimmering in the sun. They will look like psalms. Okay, and finally, here's a brand new poem. And at present, I'm calling it Writer's Toolkit, but I'm not married to that title. So if you have suggestions for a better title, I'll take them. Writer's Toolkit. I watched the rabbit happen from her den into the sunlight this morning. We're both early risers, perched on the edge of the day, waiting for the weather to make up its mind. While I lean into my oatmeal at the window, the rabbit leapfrogs the high grass until she reaches the dandelion patch. She sucks down the stems like spaghetti, chomps off the yellow buds for dessert. She takes her time in the sun, crouched so still in the open backyard that I wonder if she is hurt or sick. Her body leaves a mini crop circle in the grass when she finally hoedowns around the bend and out of sight. Yesterday, I watched a crow swagger down the hill while I washed the supper dishes, and the mockingbird swashbuckled him all the way down the fence row until finally he flew off, his black wings making a pattern in my line of vision and a flutter in my chest that I can't name. Today, I found a single black feather on the driveway, a tuft of fur pinched in the fence wires, left behind like turning points in a story I'll never finish, the ending feral and out of reach. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, it's going to take us all a good bit of time to recover after tonight, isn't it? How wonderful is all of this? Oh my gosh, Marianne, I hardly know where to start. The Axeman who pedals down the avenue like it's the road to Damascus sets us up so beautifully for that poem. And I love the idea of your grandmother's wrecking ball voice, which actually maybe wasn't, because she wasn't quite as harsh as she seemed to be. Oh my goodness, prayer requests, stand in for scandal. Oh my goodness, the propaganda of jaybirds and crows. Oh my gosh. Seeds will tell you a story of sowing and reaping. Leaf litter crackled under our feet. I felt that, just so extraordinary. Now, here's the thing. You heard the whippoorwill, Marianne, and then so did we, because your beautiful, magical, musical voice gave us the whippoorwill, the whippoorwill, the whippoorwill. So, so beautiful. And I thank you for that so much. So we're at that time in our evening where I'd like to ask some questions of our guests. So if you'd like, we can all turn on our cameras and do just a little bit of a chat. So I've asked if anybody in the audience has a question. I'll keep watching the Q&A in case you put something in there, but I always have questions. So if y'all don't mind, I'll start with Nima. Nima, I found it fascinating that you and maybe you're tired of answering this question. I apologize if you are. but you describe yourself as a District 12 teacher, and I know that that teaching is so important to you. It's a large part of who you are, and so I thought maybe you could explain what a District 12 teacher is to those who may not know. Some of us kind of know, but some may not.
Sure thing. So if you've read The Hunger Games, you know that District 12 is where Katniss comes from. And a lot of people say that in writing The Hunger Games, the author was actually trying to parallel District 12 to Appalachia, that's kind of what she was trying to represent. But I feel like I've found that in my work teaching in the Boston Public Schools, there are far more similarities between the community I teach in and the community I grew up in than there are differences. I think the differences are what people emphasize, but the similarities of what it means to be part of communities that the government effectively abandons and leaves to really fend for themselves is a similarity, whether you live in an intensely urban place or an intensely rural one. That's a really shared experience. And so it's a thing that I feel like I recognize a lot in my work with young people, is that the things I'm seeing in my school are the same things I saw in my schools growing up. And the challenges that my students and their families face are some of the same challenges that my classmates and their families were facing growing up. And so that's kind of what I think about, is what does it mean to work in spaces where really communities are being left to figure everything out for themselves, and that the policies that are being made by government don't meet the needs of people in urban places or in rural ones. I think there's just a real disconnect between people's needs and what they're getting. And so that's kind of how I think about it, is that District 12-ness exists in Boston, and it existed in Cross Lanes, and there's a lot of parallels in those spaces.
Excellent. Yes, wonderful. I love that. I'm going to real quick, I see a question. Okay, yeah, I am going to ask that, Thomas. So you will get an answer to that. But I'm going to go to Doug next, if that's okay. I thought, Doug, because you also are an educator, and but you also do a lot of advising, and you're the editor, the poetry editor at Change 7. And I wondered if you might like to talk a little bit about Change 7 and Heartwood, so that people might know, if they don't know about them, they might learn about them. And I know Heartwood actually is about maybe not even a month out from the end of your poetry contest, and I thought people might want to
That's right.
Admit.
Yeah, the poetry contest. We actually, with this year, the poetry contest at Harwood, there's a new editor. Has been an editor, I guess, for 2 years now, 2.5 years. Excuse me, Jessica Spruill Wagner, and she's just updated the website. Really, I'm an advisor for that. The graduates of the program run that magazine, and they do such a beautiful job. The poetry contest that's running right now, we have about a month left to submit, and it's a very affordable prize. A lot of places you got to pay a fair amount to get in. I think it's $5 to submit. And one of the things that we're doing ongoing is that the winner of the award this year will judge the prize next year. And this is the first year we've done that. So last year, the poetry prize was won by the wonderful Bill King, who's a poet who teaches at Davis and Elkins College and is a lovely guy. And he won the contest last year. And so he is judging this year, and he'll do a wonderful job and pick a terrific poem, I'm sure. Change 7 is an arts magazine, an online arts magazine. We publish poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and visual art. Our reading periods are January and July, and we have issues that come out January 1, April 1, July 1, and September and October 1. Sorry, every 3 months. And we're always looking for just quality. Quality is the watchword there. And I'm joined, Melissa Minsker and Natalie Seipolt are, thank you, Melissa Helton, for posting that in the chat. There's the link to Change 7. Melissa Minsker is the general editor. Natalie Seipolt is the fiction editor. Abby Freeland is the features editor, and we have a wonderful intern who's been helping us now for a year. She was a West Virginia Wesleyan College student who just graduated. Allie Householder's her name, and she's done a terrific job for us. And we're fingers crossed she's going to stay around for another year and help us out. It's a great bunch of people to work with, and we're just looking for quality work. The archives are online. You can go on and see work from Carrie. You can also see Melissa Helton, who's in the audience tonight, was a featured poet, and she has a collection or a number of poems that are there. We have our featured poet in the July issue will be West Virginia Poet Laureate Mark Harshman, and there'll be an interview to go along with that once we get around to doing it.
He's laughing.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So, Marianne, we all know that you have retired, and we're so excited for you. And Alan Holmes has also asked about what's next. How is that affecting your writing life? Are you taking some time off? It sounds like you're still busy writing, even though you just got a book out. So share, tell us what.
I can't really say yet how retirement's going because it just sort of feels like the end of the semester, like it always does. And I'm actually technically on the payroll until the end of July, and I'm teaching summer school. So yeah, I am. And I'm actually going to be teaching one class in the fall as well. So I don't know yet. I'm hoping that it will affect me in very positive ways, and that I'll find a lot more time to write, and since I won't have to devote so much time to teaching and grading. So thanks for your question, Alan. I'm really excited that I don't have to go back to school in the fall in the traditional way. So yeah.
So is there another book in the works then, Marianne, in your head, kind of? Is that?
Well, I hope so. I'm like I did with my with the Girl Singer. I'm struggling with whether or not I've got an actual book or just a pile of poems. I have a pile of poems that is enough to fill a book, but I'm just not sure that they all go together. So I'm working on it.
Oh, excellent. Wonderful. We will be very excited to see that work when it's ready. Thank you so much. I wonder, do any of you have a question for each other before I bring up something else? Anything? Been curious about? Doug?
I was just struck by how the dialogue between the unprepared dialogue that happened sort of intertextually between the three readings. That was delightful. The issues of religion and family and belonging and community and place. And maybe these are big issues that concern us all, but they seem to really dovetail beautifully. And so I was just honored to have my work in dialogue with that of Marianne and Nima.
And
yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised how often that happens here. It's serendipitous for sure, but because I should probably let our audience know that you all choose the work you're going to read in advance to help our ASL interpreters have some time to spend with the work. So it's not like you're thumbing through your work and finding these pieces because someone else has read one. It's that you all were sort of in the same spot and you're compatible in that way. And it's just really wonderful that it does often happen that way, but tonight was extraordinary. I agree. Just extraordinary. All of you. Thank you so very much. Are there, let's see, I have got another question here. Oh, same one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to dismiss that because we know we answered that one for Alan. Okay. I'll tell you what I'd like to do is, since we do have just a few minutes extra here, I'd like to see if anybody in our audience would like to join us and read a poem and share your poem with our featured readers and our future viewers as well as tonight viewers. So if you might like to share a poem tonight, if you put your name in the chat, then Devin can let you into our little window here, and you can share a poem with us if any of you are prepared and would like to. And I'll just give you a minute because I know I popped that on you. I will mention that there are lots of links in the chat tonight from Change 7 magazine and Still the Journal. And I've got Nima's and Doug's and Marianne's books in there for you to purchase those. I will tell you all, you may not know this, or you may, so I don't mean to be redundant, but at the bottom of the chat window, looks like a little piece of paper and then a little smiley face. And beside that is 3 little dots. And if you click on that, it says save chat. And if you click that, as we're just ready to leave tonight, you'll be able to save all this information in the chat. So you can go back and order these books or submit to Change 7 or submit to Still Journal. And I should give Marianne a chance perhaps to talk just a minute about Still Journal. Would you want to do that, Marianne, in case people are interested in submitting there?
Sure. We probably won't open submissions again until the very late fall or around December. We're planning to have a themed issue in February. And so we'll be putting a call out for that. We haven't decided what the theme's going to be yet, but we'll be putting a call out for that. And that'll be part of the submission period, which, like I said, might be late fall or into December.
I muted myself and I forgot. Thank you for that, Marianne. And that's exciting to know you're going to do a theme. That I know early on, often it would, again, that serendipitous thing that happens, you would get batches of poems that sort of formed their own selves into a theme, and you would have a section in the journal that was based on a theme that would have evolved from the submission process. And I know I always enjoy that so much as well. And both Change 7 and Still the Journal have really wonderful interviews with up and coming poets, and also book reviews that are just really fantastic and so very well done, and always so helpful when you're looking for new books to purchase.
I will say, I did forget to mention that our June issue, which we'll publish probably the first week of June, the fiction is going to be kind of a celebration of Pride Month. So it'll be all gay and queer writers in fiction, some in poetry, and we'll do some other things, but mostly fiction. So our fiction editor, who right now is Julia Watts, is writing a little letter from the editor, and she's curating that. So I'm really excited about that. That'll be in June.
Oh, that's wonderful. I don't know how y'all manage. My goodness, that's a lot. I have another question that came in. It says, this person would like to know, how did you all choose the works that you ended up choosing to share tonight? So how do you, as a reading poet, decide what you're going to read, especially that far in advance? Because I asked them about a month ago to make the decision on what they wanted to read tonight. And that's a lot to ask of someone. So do you all want to speak to that?
Sure, I'll go first. First of all, I think about the time limit. So that I really do. I mean, you know, how much time I have, and I do a little practice reading. Oh, I can't read that. I can't read that. And I also, like I said, I wanted to read some things from my book that I don't usually read when I have a chance to read. So that was sort of my guiding thought this time through. Read different things and stay within the time limit.
That was the same for me. I was trying to think about something that was right in terms of time. And also I've been doing a lot of readings lately, and I wanted to read something different than the things I've been reading. So that combination didn't leave a lot of options. And this was a fun one to read.
And for me, I'm lucky enough to know both Marianne and Nima's work. And so I wanted to choose pieces that might, you know, have some sort of synchrony and contribute to the overall effect of the evening. And knowing where Stewart's Opera House is, I tried to choose material that was roughly Appalachian in focus, and wanted to have some sort of cohesion, try to at least anticipate some kind of cohesion between all the pieces.
Anything else? Any questions that have popped up to any of you for each other while we've done some talking here? Have we forgotten anything? And we don't have anybody who wants to read for us tonight. I understand that. I have to be completely honest. I would not want to read tonight after these amazing features this evening. It'd be very difficult to pop in and read a piece after this glorious work tonight. And I want to thank you all three of you so much, Nima, Doug, and Marianne, for being with us tonight. It has been such a joy for me to have you all in, because I admire you all so very much. So this has just really been a dream
Thank you for hosting us, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks, Doug, Marianne, and everyone who's here. This has just been really lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nima. Thank you, Marianne. It's lovely to see you and be with you.
Thank you all so much. Now, I don't want y'all to forget that we're going to start back up again in the fall, and I look forward to seeing everybody for our fall season, September 15th, October 20th, and November 17th. We have guests Diane Seuss, Maurice Manning, Rita Quillen, John Lee, Cortez Harris, Sandra Gill, Rosemary Traumer, and I can hardly wait. So keep that in mind, September, October, November for Spoken and Heard. Again, I want to thank everyone who came out tonight, and all of you who will end up watching the live stream or the stream on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter. And I want to wish you all a safe and wonderful summer. I think we still need to be vigilant and careful, but I want you to have a wonderful time, and I'll see y'all back here in the fall. Okay, so thank you all so much.
Thanks again to our ASL folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.